So now, without further ado, please welcome Jennifer Finney Boylan, an author of 19 books. Her memoir, She's Not There, was the first best-selling work by a transgender American, and since 2014, she's been the inaugural Anna Quindlen Writer in Residence at Barnard College of Columbia University. She is also on the faculty of the Breadloaf Writers Conference of Middlebury College and the Sirenland Writers Conference in Positano, Italy. She is the president of PEN America, and from 2011 to 2018, she was the member of the board of directors of GLAAD, including 4 years as national co-chair. Her work has also appeared in The New Yorker, The Washington Post, The Boston Globe, Literary Hub, Downtown East, and many other publications. Boylan is in conversation with Congresswoman Sarah McBride. Congresswoman McBride proudly represents Delaware as its sole member of Congress. She grew up in Wilmington and has been serving the state for decades as a public servant and advocate. She worked for former Governor Jack Markle and the late Attorney General Beau Biden, and served as the national spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign, the national largest LGBTQ equal rights organization. So please welcome them both.
Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. That's Sarah. I'm Jenny. And I'm really...
We all look alike, so
yeah. I'm really glad you're here. This is going to be a somewhat different kind of event than the ones that I normally do in bookstores, especially here on a national book tour, where it's sometimes I blink and I don't know what city I'm in. But tonight, not only am I with the amazing Sarah McBride, I want to say the Honorable. Are you the Honorable?
Yeah.
Technically, the Honorable. Let's just say the Honorable. But there are a number of other honorable people here who represent advocates for trans people and queer people in the aughts and teens. And so in a way, this also gives us a chance to have something of a summit to talk about where we've been in trans advocacy and where we're going. I'm joined tonight by the Honorable Amanda Simpson. Woo! And I'm going to get this wrong. Former Assistant Secretary of Commerce? Defense. First trans person appointed by a president to a cabinet level position. Is that?
Not quite cabinet level.
But appointed by. We have. Okay, I'm gonna hop over you. We have Ms. Mara Kiesling, yeah, who is former head of NCTE and just an incredible powerhouse for trans rights and human rights for decades now. Founded NCTE and has been my friend for a long time now. We also have Admiral, retired, Rachel Levine with us tonight, who is supposedly a civilian now, but you will always be the Admiral in my heart. There's Charlotte Clymer back there. Wait, where'd you go? There she is. There's Charlotte Clymer. An all-around troublemaker. And I mean, I could introduce probably, and there's, oh yeah, you, Dawn. I mean, it's a room full of people who who have history with this. So we'll do a kind of, by your leave, Congresswoman, I'll do a short reading, and then we'll have a conversation, and then maybe we'll move some of these chairs around and have a conversation that way. Does that sound good? Okay, so let's start over here. Oh, there's a different microphone. I'll put this one down. And here's this one, Cleavage. This is the introduction. Ready? I might move around a little bit. I was born in 1958, the second day of summer. It was also the birthday of Meryl Streep and Chris Christopherson, both of whom I later resembled, although not at the same time. Ha ha ha. I began the story of my life with those words in She's Not There, a memoir published in 2003. At the time, it seemed reasonable enough, beginning with the beginning. Now, I wonder whether I chose the right companions. Instead of Streep and Christopherson, I could just as easily pick others born that day, Elizabeth Warren, say, or John Dillinger, or Dan Brown. Would my book have landed differently if my chaperones had been the senator, or the gangster, or the author of the Da Vinci Code? Sometimes I think about it, all the other lives I could have led. At the time of its publication, She's Not There was a real brouhaha. I was on Oprah 5 times, Larry King twice, Will Forte imitated me on Saturday Night Live. Though hardly the first trans memoir, not by like a million years, it came out at a moment when things were changing, at least a little. I hope that She's Not There, the book I call SNOT, did push the needle at a crucial moment. The publisher's promotional copy now incredibly calls it, and this is their language, quote, the book that jump-started the transgender rights movement. Okay, big words. Probably not actually true words, but big words. But look, She's Not There was a book written by someone for whom everything was new. The voice is that of a woman who's in the late stages of an amazing ride. Whoops. Her clothes still smoking after she's been shot out of a cannon. Memoirs of transgender people are almost always about that moment, transition, when a little morning dew is still twinkling on the cobwebs. But, you know, there's a good reason why stories about people like me, stories about people like us, are the focus on that passage. By any measure, it's an astonishing thing. So what is it like to go from a man to a woman or vice versa, or to some identity even more liberating than that? Fine. But a more important, if less scandalous, question is, what is life like for people who finally have the thing they've been yearning for all their lives? Indeed, what is life like for transgender people as we age, as we inevitably morph from someone covered with sequins into someone whose hair is gray? Or would be if I didn't go to the salon. And what about the people we've been and our histories from the times before? Surely all of that doesn't just vanish like breath on a mirror. Well, I've spent about a third of my life over here. I have stories to tell now that my spangles are no longer aflame about the differences between the worlds of men and women, not to mention the fertile territory that lies between. But let's admit that there's a huge chunk of the population, the majority, maybe, that still doesn't get this trans business at all. There are people with good hearts, and others, who nonetheless could not with any certainty tell you the difference between a transgender person and the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It doesn't help that the best-known transgender person in the country is probably Caitlyn Jenner, whom no one could claim has emerged as the transgender Encyclopedia Brown. Yeah, the lawyers made me change that line. The original line was no one could, who is is probably Caitlyn Jenner, who it turns out to be as dumb as a bag of hammers.
You use that later.
Yeah, well.
Why? Why do they want you to change?
Yeah, they thought that Caitlyn would come for me, so to speak. Sorry. What? It's getting warm in here. Look, the stories in this book examine the differences between manhood and womanhood as I've experienced them, in everything from food to fashion, from love to loss. They also address the differences between coming out now in the current environment of blowback and fear and coming out 25 years ago, when transness, to some people, seemed a thing as obscure as membership in the Royal Antediluvian Order of Buffaloes. Back then, in an era before people received formal instructions on how to hate me, many individuals encountering a transgender person for the first time were left with nothing to fall back upon by way of guidance than their own sense of human decency. When I came out to my evangelical Christian mother, for instance, she didn't respond to her weeping child with a lecture about the dangers of trans women in sports or concerned theories about social contagions. Instead, she took me in her arms, wiped my tears away, and said, "Love will prevail." I have been blessed by good fortune in the passage that I have made, but I know plenty of people who are not so lucky, people who even now wait in vain for the people that they love to show them a single crumb of kindness. So perhaps the central question of this book is not specific to gender at all. Instead, it's the universal dilemma at the heart of so much human trouble. Why is change the thing we all long for, as well as the thing we most fear? I was born on June 22nd, 1958, the second day of summer. It was also the birthday of Billy Wilder and Cyndi Lauper, both of whom I later resembled, although not the same. It was Cyndi Lauper who sang back in 1983 that girls just want to have fun. We want other things as well, of course, to be loved, to be respected, to be safe from violence and fear, to be able to make our own decisions about our own bodies. But sure, fun's on the list too. Emma Goldman, the anarchist, is credited with saying, "If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution." Although apparently she never actually said that. But she did say everyone has the right to self-expression and what she called beautiful, radiant things. I can tell you that in the days before, as well as in the days after, I have caught fleeting glimpses of things both beautiful and radiant. I saw them in the sky above me after the wind in Nova Scotia blew me back from the edge of a cliff I was about to jump off of. I saw them in a dark room as my future wife unexpectedly stepped toward me from the shadows. And I saw them in my mother's eyes as she folded my weeping self into her arms and quoted 1 Corinthians. These three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Billy Wilder, for his part, directed and co-wrote Some Like It Hot, the film that ends with Jack Lemmon trying to explain to Joe E. Brown why they can never be married. Daphne looks into Jack Lemmon is playing the part of Daphne, as you probably all know. Daphne looks into the distance and says wistfully, "I can never have children." "We'll adopt some," says Osgood without any reservation. So I have a question about Osgood. Is he the kindest man alive, generous and open-minded? Or is he just, kind of demented? After all this time, I'm still not sure, even though I've looked at things from both sides now. Maybe at this late, it doesn't matter. It's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know men or women at all. "Oh, you don't understand, Osgood," Daphne cries. She rips off her wig. "I'm a man." Osgood looks at her with obliviousness or what might, just possibly, be love. "Well," he says, "nobody's perfect." Cleavage. Hi. I feel a little funny, standing up and, overshadowing you, Congresswoman, because, you're kind of awesome. So I'm a little bit intimidated here. But let's. What do you think? How are you doing, Congresswoman? How are things going?
Well, I'm in Congress, so comes with all of that. I will just say I am so excited to be here. First off, I love Politics and Prose.
Yeah.
They are fantastic.
And how about this wharf location? Amazing.
Yeah. This was not here when I was in college. Like most of DC, it has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. But Politics and Prose is a fantastic, fantastic business. And I was actually here for a reading of my book in 2018 at their other location. And so I just hope we can all give them another round of applause, the staff
Yay.
that are here. And I am so excited to be here with you, Jenny. Jenny moderated the first discussion when my book came out in 2018 at the Strand in New York City.
Beautiful Strand bookstore.
And I was starstruck. I was intimidated because
No, you.
Yeah.
No, you.
because you were really, for me, the first contemporary example of a trans person that wasn't, as you write about in this book, on Jerry Springer
Yeah.
being exploited.
I mean, that's the hardest thing I think that some of us experienced, that when we were growing up, at least for me, it was, I almost never saw anybody like me on TV or in the movies. And if there was anyone even vaguely like me, they were usually either a villain or else someone, who was a figure of ridicule.
Yes.
And thank goodness all that has changed.
Yeah. Yes. I am so, I just want to say, I am so grateful for you as I start this journey in Congress, because I don't know that I would be here at all, and I certainly know that I would not be here in Congress if not for your example, if not for Amanda Simpson. So you were the first contemporary example of a trans person that I saw that, like I said, wasn't a punchline in a comedy or a dead body in a drama or a villain in a movie or being paraded in front of a screaming, hooting and hollering audience on Jerry Springer. And Amanda, I remember very clearly the night that I opened up my overly big desktop computer to see the news of you getting appointed, becoming the first trans woman appointed by a president of the United States to a position in the federal government. I'll never forget Mara Kiesling, the first trans person that I know of that I ever sat down and had a conversation with. I had just come out to my parents on Christmas Day in 2011 and was with you at a Thai restaurant, because trans people only eat at Thai restaurants,
That's
I think,
right.
in DC,
That's right.
within a week. And Admiral Dr. Rachel Levine, the first Senate-confirmed presidential appointee who is trans. I am in a space, Charlotte, who was my coworker at the Human Rights Campaign and who we forged and I think deepened our understanding of advocacy in the world together and how to create change. And so I am here in a space with people who I am intimidated by and I am in awe of. And it just does my heart a lot of good after 2 months in Congress, in a Republican-controlled Congress, to be in a space with family and with people who have made that service in Congress possible.
Yeah, indeed.
And I know we do want to open up the conversation. Certainly would love to have some of these voices included in the conversation and have questions from the audience. But I would love, Jenny, to start on, I always think the process of a writer in writing a book says as much as any other topic when you talk about a book. And I think it's easy to think, oh, well, you wrote this book because we are at a pretty significant moment in the history of the trans movement. But I'm sure when you started writing this book, you didn't realize that $200 million, $300 million would be spent about trans people in a campaign. You didn't necessarily predict that a Republican, let alone Donald Trump, would be in the White House and using trans people as the centerpiece of his culture war agenda. And so while the book is incredibly timely, I'd love to go back to the first few days when you were talking perhaps with your agent or your publisher and thinking about writing this book.
Yeah, I wish the book wasn't so timely.
Yeah, me too.
That would be nice.
Me too.
This book took me longer to write than or I spent more time between the first draft and publication than anything of mine. And it came about. I was having lunch with a woman named Deb Futter, who's an editor, and she was the original editor of She's Not There 20-some years ago. And she said, you should revisit that book. You should do like a bookend, 20 years later. Excuse me. And but I can't do both of these at once, so I'll talk really loud for just a second. So she said, why don't you do a bookend? I said, okay. So I started working on it. And it was good, but it wasn't really exactly what I wanted. So I did a couple full drafts. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then put it aside to do this other novel with Jodi Picoult called Mad Honey, which I don't know if you know this book, but I'll tell you very, very briefly that. While I was working on what became this book, I had a dream one night, literally, and I woke up, and the dream was I was co-authoring a book with Jodi Picoult, and there were 2 voices in the book. One was a young transgender woman who'd been murdered, and the other was the mother of her boyfriend who was accused of the crime, which is very specific, and I don't usually dream like that. Usually my dreams are like, I'm fighting a giant squid at the airport or something. But I thought, wow. So I got a cup of coffee. I got back in bed with a cup of coffee, which is my favorite thing to do in the morning. And back in the day when Twitter was fun, and it wasn't that long ago, there was something called author Twitter, and we all followed each other. And I tweeted out, I just dreamed I was co-authoring a book with Jodi Picoult. And Jodi was online at that moment and sent me a DM and said, what was this book about? And I told her what I just told you, and she said, and I quote, LOL, let's do it. So LOL meant that a couple years later, when there was this giant pandemic and everything we had to do was canceled, suddenly there was a lot of time. So we wrote this book together. And so Mad Honey kind of dominated my life for a couple years. But when all was said and done, I came back to Cleavage, which for a long time was called He's Not There, or Both Sides Now. I kept going back and forth until one night I was looking at the dictionary for like words that meant division, because I was thinking about the divisions between men and women, as well as the places where there's not a division. And I came upon the word cleavage, and I thought, oh, don't make me do it. And I asked a friend at dinner one night, what do you think about cleavage? And he laughed so hard he fell out of his chair, and it was his house and his chair, so he was definitely taken by surprise. So that's how we landed. It was 5 years ago. Even though the part I just read about the current era of blowback and fear, I wrote that part 2 years ago. So seems like maybe I knew what was coming.
Clearly, and it is a shame how timely this book is, as you said. I'm curious, really, what sparked your desire to do this sort of update to She's Not There?
If you're a writer, stories are my bread and butter, and there are a lot of stories I hadn't told. There are also some stories I wanted to revisit. But in the thing that really helped me finally figure out this book is when I realized I could divide it into 2 parts, 1 and 2, and the first chapter of part 1 is fathers, which is about my father, and then the last part is called sons. The first chapter of part 2 is mothers, and the last chapter is daughters. So that gave me a kind of a structure. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling and answering not the question which you specifically asked. which was what again?
Well, I think you sort of said, I mean, you basically just had stories that you hadn't
Oh yeah,
included.
yeah.
And
Why
stories that you
revisit?
wanted, yeah.
Yeah. I had a lot of stories that I wanted to tell, things I wanted to revisit, things that have changed. I mean, I don't know. We can ask the brain trust here if you agree with this, but in my sense, things. So, what are the stories I wanted to tell? One of the stories I wanted to look at was the difference between coming out now and coming out 25 years ago. Some of you know I have a transgender daughter. She came out 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, and how did I react? I freaked out. Did I put my arms around my child and say, love will prevail? No. I remember literally jolting in my chair, literally like I'd been struck by lightning. And my first thought was, damn, because, well, for one, as most of us know, it's a hard life. And even when things go about as well as they can, which I think, and there are a lot of success stories in this room, it's still a hard life, and I didn't want it for someone that I love. But I also went through that thing that everybody else was going through around me at the time. You know, like, gee, I'm fine. I'll try to follow you, but you know, thinking privately. But I loved you the way you were, which is what people said to me 25 years ago. So it was a very interesting comeuppance for me and opened my eyes. Because, you know, when I came out back in the day, I wanted everyone to be happy for me. I was like, look, great news! You know, I'm not afraid anymore. And people were like, wait, you're what? I remember when I came out in 2000, one friend said, I just don't get this. Are you saying you're like super gay? Which at the time I was kind of like, I was pissed off by that. But then later, you know, now I'm like, well, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks. So anyway, coming out now, as my daughter did, and coming out then. So 25 years ago, things were in some ways harder because it was like this, at least for me, in Maine, it was like this mysterious underground. You know, I had to find an endocrinologist by asking people, like, who's the one guy in the whole state who will see us, you know, and, you know, who's the electrologist who would actually work on us? What do I have to do in order to be approved for hormones? And it was a mystery, like being in like the French underground or something. So now, the path of transition is well blazed, and there are good resources that you can go to and find online. So in that way, things are easier. On the other hand, as I described a little bit, when I came out back in the day, because it was so new, supposedly, and people were just kind of had a hard time getting their minds around it, people were generally nice because they didn't know what else to do. Now it's a different world, and now it's really interesting. So I had a piece in the New York Times today that I'm really proud of, and it was on. Oh, stop! But it was on. You know, it was posted on Twitter, so you can imagine the comments that have been coming and the things that people have been saying and sending to me. And there's been a lot of love, and I'm grateful for that. But there's a lot of the other stuff, and it feels like a lot more of the other stuff than there used to be.
There is absolutely.
Perhaps you know what I'm talking about, Congresswoman.
I can relate. I can relate. Twitter, not to dead name X, but Twitter is basically just 4chan at this point. It's
pretty scary.
It is, and there is no question that today, and I want to come back to sort of the political moment that we're in and the dynamics that we're facing, but there's no question, to your point, that today people 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, I think, when they encountered this topic, there was a curiosity and an exploitive curiosity, but it was not received through the framework of a political ideology in the same way as it is today.
Yeah, there's that phrase, gender ideology. I kept hearing. I'm like, I didn't even know I had a gender ideology. I thought I was an English teacher.
Well, and people, their own pre-existing ideology is informing how they interact with and engage with trans people and topics around us. And it's, 20 years ago, there was sort of a blank canvas and maybe just that sort of tokenizing or exploitative curiosity, and both are challenging to navigate and also very different to navigate. And I do have one other question specifically about the writing process of this book, because you talk a lot about the differences between between 2000 and the 2000s and now, between the 90s and now, for how you even talk about trans people, about how you think trans people should talk about trans people. But I'm curious if you noticed as you were writing it, changes in the way you were writing about your own story and your own identity in comparison to She's Not There.
Yeah, in rereading She's Not There, in preparation for this, the thing that I noticed was that there's an air of apology to it, or an air of, I want very badly to be, the author of that book wants very badly to be understood. And so I'm kind of taking people by the hand and trying to help them get their mind around something that might be a challenge. And now I don't think, I certainly know that my daughter didn't apologize when she came out. There's no explanation. She just kind of said, "Yep, I'm trans," And I think I see my students who are genderqueer and or trans, and they're just like, yeah, it's not my responsibility to explain myself to you. What is going on with that watch? I would like to know. Is there something you'd like to share with the whole class? Yeah. Okay. We're good. So I think in talking about our issues now, I feel a little bit less in need of explaining myself and apologizing. I feel like, look, there are other things to talk about right now, and I want to put my attention on those.
So getting to this moment that we're in right now, and to your point, the degree of vitriol and dehumanization that we see around trans people, the clear focus of state governments in many places and now the federal government targeting trans people with a degree of scale and force. And even if you compare, for instance, the executive order or the what Trump said about trans troops in his first term versus what the executive order said this term, talking about how trans people's basically self-deception means that they cannot be honest and therefore they shouldn't be service members. Even just the same policies are crouched in incredibly dehumanizing, otherizing language in a way that didn't even exist in the same way 6 or 8 years ago. And I'm curious why you believe we are in this moment and how we've gotten here. Obviously, not by our own choosing as trans people, but I'm curious what you think are some of the factors that have fomented this current moment.
Well, I have some theories about that.
Yeah.
But it also feels to me like that maybe that question and this moment is a good moment for us to invite some of these my friends and advocates here to join us here. Would you be willing to just stand up, grab your chair, and sit hither and yon and face the audience? Come on, grab your chair.
Yeah, come on up.
Rachel Levine.
We've got people here who know this topic. Oh, we might have other microphones and other chairs.
Other chairs. Okay.
I will be honest, these chairs are very, I feel like I'm about to fall over in this chair.
Yeah, it's a little, okay. Here's one. There's one. There's another chair. Okay. Okay. So, let's.
I want to hear your answer on this first, though, Jenny, because I think you have such One of the things that has always struck me about you, and one of the things that I have tried to emulate in a lot that I do, is just this degree of radical compassion. You seem to exude a love from your heart that is so unconditional and so warm and so enveloping that it becomes impossible to hate you.
Oh, I hope that's true. Although some people have not quite gotten close enough to feel the warm glow that I clearly emanate. By the way, Charlotte, you don't want to come up here, do you? You are invited to. I'm going to listen. Okay, all right. But please join the conversation, even from there, if something seems logical. Well, to some degree, it's a mystery to me why now, other than that it seems to me that if something is terrible, it seems that this is the current policy of let's make things as terrible as they can be. But it may be, and I want to know all your opinions about this, that we have been defined by some of the most difficult issues around transness. But let me back up and stop sputtering. What I mean to say is the abortion rights movement was affected by the demonization of something called partial birth abortion, right? So they took this very, very rare condition, very rare thing, and made it. I mean, even that phrase, partial birth abortion, is a political phrase, not a medical one, and that's how abortion was defined, and at least two of the hardest things to get your mind around right now are trans women's participation in women's sports and, say, hormone blockers for children. Those are hard issues, and I think everyone here can probably make the argument for why those. We can make the argument for those, but making the argument demands a patience with an understanding of nuance. It demands patience, and it demands a desire to understand something that's difficult, and some parts of which are still kind of vague. So I think that we were defined by some of the hardest issues to understand, and rather than the fact that I don't particularly want to play sports with your kid. I don't want to
play sports.
I want to teach.
Someone just invited me to pickleball today. I was like, hell no.
I want to teach them English. You are not here to
play sports.
You are here to represent the people of Delaware, and each person here has. Here's my friend Rachel Levine, you were such a good advocate, but your job was as Assistant Secretary of Health? Assistant Secretary of Health. So the main thing we want is we want to be able to do our jobs, we want to be able to walk tall, and guess what? We also would like to be left alone. So so I'm not saying this very clearly at all. Wait, Amanda, step up.
Can I help out a little bit?
Step up, please.
Because what I'm feeling is what a larger movement went through, say, 20 years ago, right after some of us transitioned. We did it about the same time, which was going after the gay movement, right? And it was done from a political standpoint, because I think you're making it way more complicated than what's really going on. It was a way to get people to the polls. It was a way to energize people to say, there's something wrong and we need to get you to the polls to fix it. And so, we saw marriage amendments, banning marriage state by state, even in Congress. We saw all this, and it happened. And then we mobilized together, and we figured out a way to bring the understanding of this nation to a point of acceptance. And slowly we changed the opinions because we became visible, the LGBT community. And the T's were out there. I remember some arguments we had with leadership in organizations about don't forget the T. But we won. And so the next wave of politicals said, okay, well, we did well for a while. Let's find another little spot we can nitpick on. And that's when they got into the, men in women's restrooms. Boys playing girls' sports, the mutilation of children. They just make this up to make people angry, to get them to the polls. And the problem is they don't see the bigger picture. And it's up to us once again to educate, to advocate, to change the public opinion. I remember when I was living in Arizona and I was running for the state house there many years ago, we did a series of advertisements on television and we defeated the marriage amendment back then. And we were the only state to do that. And of course, they came back a couple years later, reworded it, and it passed. But it was about the neighbors and that there were LGBT people in your neighborhood. We were I was an aerospace engineer. We had firemen and policemen. We had military people all doing these ads saying, look, we're just your neighbors, right? Get to know the individual, not this larger concept of an LGBT person. And that worked. And I think we have to do that again. It's about being that personal introduction to that. You're an educator. I'm an aerospace person. You're, a columnist. We do these things to show that we're just like everyone else. We're human. You talk about that in the book often. And I think it's for that purpose, but we have a leader sitting down the street who has made this such a sharp point to help energize or misdirect what's going on. And, being a Jewish woman, I remember, not personally, but I look back at what happened in 33 and 35 overseas and think about the similarities of picking on one group of defenseless, underrepresented people to help focus everyone else to be behind you. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. And we have to understand that it may not be about us, but it's up to us to solve it.
Hear, hear. Well said.
Amen.
I think that's very well said, Amanda. I'd like to say a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank you and to thank you. You are really the poet laureate of the trans community, you are our poet laureate. And so, and articulate so well things that many of us have gone through and go through and have a way of humanizing it with your stories. Your books are rooted in the past. Back in the 70s, I see stories from the 70s and think back. But to, as Sarah was saying, they're ripped from the headlines now. And I'd like to thank you. And I told you when we had dinner months and months ago that you are our future. It's just we admire you and thank you and think so highly and well of the work that you're doing, even in the struggles that you have. So thank you. I would agree with Amanda about the political aspect of this. It's been very well recorded that this is a specific strategy, an iterative strategy developed by right-wing think tanks in Washington to split the progressive movement, is that they lost marriage, did not feel that they could gain that back, and so they were looking for a scapegoat, and we were there, and thought that they could make progress by demonizing us and otherizing us, starting with trans athletes, then going on to transgender medicine or gender-affirming care for youth. And now you see, denying that we exist at all. And then potentially trying to go back to sexual orientation as well. But, see how they're going to go as far as they can go. And it was a specific political and ideological strategy, which unfortunately they weaponized and were very successful in doing that. And I think that we were conveniently there. And but now, what do? Now here we are in this extremely challenging environment, and the key will be how our community, supported by the broader LGBTQ plus community and our allies, respond.
Here. Let's hear from Mara.
Yeah.
The problem is DEI. No,
Thank you for
I don't believe that. And
Not everybody knows your humor, Mara.
extreme gender ideology. So I think Amanda is essentially right, but what I think we're forgetting, and this is, they did this. I don't mean to say we did this, but this was an iterative thing that we saw 10 years ago. And we saw them trying. We saw them trying with bathrooms. We saw them trying with other things. And then they landed on this sports thing, which we totally screwed up. Instead of talking about the 7-year-old who wants to play soccer with her friends, we were talking about Olympians and NCAA swimmers, which we should have been defending against, but that wasn't our strongest argument. And what I have been saying for 10 years is we don't seem to understand, we as progressives don't seem to understand that we're not getting, we keep thinking that they're getting very limited news and we're getting the real news. And we do not understand that we are also part of the problem. We are not focused on what narrowness we're hearing. Now, I believe this is about populism and politics, as Amanda said. But they came over and started picking people off on our side, and we have never done that. Progressives won't do that. Progressives will never, ever, ever welcome somebody to come over from the other side. And that's a mistake, and we've got to figure out how to do that, how to reach out to people, how to win over people. And then once we win them over, we have to fucking embrace them. And most of the activists I know won't do that. They're like, well, ugh. And I believe we have made the mistake of not prioritizing things. I was talking to a movement person a year ago now, and I said, what's the biggest issue? And this person said, definitely J.K. Rowling. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, J.K. Rowling's, I think you handled J.K. Rowling really well in your book. I would love to see how Sarah would do it, because she's got a J.K. Rowling in her world. Oh, yes. But by the way, I have, anyway, we'll talk about that. But that J.K. Rowling may be a jerk. She may be part of the problem. She isn't the problem. She's just not the priority. And so much energy, trans energy and trans social media energy has been spent. J.K. Rowling doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, I was so furious the other day when the New York Times wrote a perfectly great editorial saying Trump is going to regret what he's doing to trans people. And there were trans people saying, fuck the New York Times. Where do they come off? Because they're part of the problem. We need to embrace the people who do good work for us. We need to embrace the people who care about us. We need to embrace the people who correct us when we're not hitting it right on the head. So I believe this is a MAGA problem. I believe this is a right-wing problem. I believe that's who's causing it all. I don't think we're responding well.
That's well said.
So that actually is a perfect segue into a sort of forward-looking question, because I agree with you, Mara. I think we have lost the art of coalition building. We have created a space where there is no room for imperfect allies. We have eliminated space for people to grow because they at least perceive that they will be permanently guilty for having been wrong. Amanda talked about the marriage equality moment and the backlash. In some ways, I feel like this is arguably worse because I think we were where we were 6 years ago in public opinion, in policy momentum, was much better than where the gay rights movement was in 2002 and 2003. I mean, we have lost ground by almost every objective metric. We are, in some ways, in a free fall, just to be completely honest.
Did you say free fall?
Free fall.
Yeah.
What we have been doing over the last couple of years has clearly not been working. And I think one of the things you pointed out, Amanda, about the marriage equality movement is we saw marriage bans pass across the country. We saw a president reelected. I actually think some of the research disputes the degree to which it actually played the role that the immediate aftermath narrative that has taken hold suggests, but a president for whom their reelection strategy was built around marriage. But we didn't respond to that by saying that everyone who opposes marriage equality is a bigot. We didn't respond to that by demanding perfection on the issue of marriage equality. In fact, movement organizations were fine with politicians who were opposed to marriage equality but supported civil unions for several years. And we created space in the movement writ large, we being the movement writ large, for people to grow and to change. And we extended a degree of grace, which has been abused historically, but we extended a degree of grace and we saw people grow. And one of the things you talk about, Jenny, in the book is sort of the degree of grace that you extended. I think you embody grace every single day, but it sounds like you felt like you maybe extended too much grace to people when you were doing the interview circuit for She's Not There, with some of the questions that were asked and and when I was reading that, one of the things I thought is, that might be true, but have we overcorrected? Yeah. And so I'm curious what you think we should be doing, to Mara's point, to stop the bleeding and start to invite people back in.
You know, the wonderful thing about the marriage equality movement, well, obviously the best thing was the fact that we could get married now. Great. But a secondary thing that happened is that it changed the way people thought about gay people. By which I mean, if in 1999, if you asked my mother's bridge club about what do you think about gay people, there might be, if you ask their husbands in particular, you'd probably get some kind of middle school jokes about how gay people have sex, and gay men in particular.
Or sodomy.
Yeah. So the marriage equality movement used that phrase, love is love. Everybody knows that phrase, love is love. And it changed the conversation from a conversation about sex to a conversation about love. So you ask my mother's bridge club, who's in favor of butt fucking? And maybe one or two of those ladies would, but most of them would be, ooh, ooh, ooh. But if you said who's in favor of love, everybody's in favor of love. So the challenge. So I think that was in some ways a change in. It was really a cultural change, and you still hear. Was it just was it Lynn? Was it Miranda? Who said it? Someone had said it at like the Academy Awards or something. Love is love, and it's still a phrase we hear, and we're like, yes. The thing for us, of course, that being trans is not really so much about who you love; it's about who you are. And the question of getting, for cisgender people and people who aren't trans, getting your mind around the idea that you're not at home in your body is that requires imagination. And we don't have a love is love. We don't have a identity is identity. I mean, if we had the bumper sticker, that would help maybe. But what we want is for people is, I guess I read about this a little bit, that for me, the sense of not being at home in your body is actually much more universal, particularly for those of us of a certain age. You look in the mirror and you think, oh my God, who is that? Who is this old person? Or who is this person? I don't know. All the changes we go through, I feel as if that's that if there's a way of making that something that everybody can relate to. I don't know. There might be other ways. I want to hear from Charlotte actually, because we haven't really passed you the mic. And
People are up here, though.
yeah, although
I'm
well,
getting
also
old.
wait,
I'm
can I
getting
take a
old,
moment?
believe me.
Can I take a moment? I also want to acknowledge the fact that this is a panel of white women, mostly, but not exclusively, binary women. And so this is, I just want to really address that, because to the extent that if this conversation, I know, is being recorded by the bookstore, I'm hoping people will see it. But if people see it, I want people to know this is not a representative group of trans people. It's the people that I happen to have gotten to be friends with over the years as a writer. So I want to apologize for that and just acknowledge it. Anyway, back to Charlotte.
I mean, listen, I think we're being way too hard on ourselves. Way too hard. We're fighting with one hand tied behind our back on several fronts. The first big thing is that we are a fraction of the LGBTQ community. There's something like, according to polling, 63% of Americans don't believe they know a trans person, which means it's harder for them to have that human connection, as opposed to, 88% of Americans who do personally know an LGBTQ person, according to polling. So there's that, right? Second thing is that our big fights are coming in a wildly different media environment than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. The third thing is that there is this perception that the Democratic Party is on the forefront fighting trans rights every day. And folks, that is just not true. It is the opposite of true. And I'm a proud Democrat. I'm a proud Joe Biden Democrat. I voted for him. I'm very proud I voted for him. And that man did stand beside the trans community during his term. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But I got to tell you, the last 12 months watching the Democratic Party, the last 3 years watching the Democratic Party as a whole refuse to engage on these issues has been demoralizing and extremely frustrating. I've had hundreds of private conversations with journalists, elected officials, activists, nonprofit org leaders who are not trans, but in the movement, and they're either intimidated by the issues, or they're scared to talk about them, or they're just not informed on them. We are fighting with one hand tied behind our backs all the time. And so, when I look at this, I kind of compare it to the lean-in controversy when Sheryl Sandberg, that's right, she dropped lean-in, I think in 2010 or 2011, what it was. And there was this huge controversy, and rightfully so, because the book purported to be this feminist revolution in the corporate world. And it wasn't. It was telling women how they should do better in the workforce, not calling accountability of CEOs who maintain systems in place that oppressed women. That was the point. And it worked. It worked for Sheryl Sanders. I mean, it was a really great book for her. I mean, she sold millions of copies and it lifted up her brand, but it didn't do a goddamn thing. I refuse to believe that trans people are at the center of culpability for what we've seen right now. No, I think that's bullshit. I think that the bulk of the blame is on Democrats who refuse to speak out. I think it's on journalists who are incurious and scared to death to investigate the issues and push back against Republicans who gleefully spread disinformation. What was it? I think it was 2 months ago that Richie Torres, who is a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, the Equality Caucus, which is the LGBTQ group in Congress, He gave an interview with Notice, which is one of these news orgs, and he basically said outright, yeah, I don't know how to message on this, so I'm just not even going to try. The co-chair of the Equality Caucus, an openly gay man who has certainly a higher per capita of trans constituents in his district than most other districts in the country, said...
Except Delaware.
Except Delaware. Yes, except Delaware. Basically said out loud, I don't know how to message on this issue, so, whatevs. We're just going to see what happens in the next cycle. No, trans people are not to blame. I want Democrats to stand up. I want journalists to have some goddamn guts in their belly and push back against disinformation that they know is wrong. And I want to stop trans people from beating up ourselves for fighting an unfair fight from the get-go.
Can I just add something really quickly, Charlotte? I think you may have misheard me. Or
Oh, no, this
misunderstood
wasn't
me.
on you, by the way, because you are right. We do need to invite people in.
I don't think
Yeah.
we're the problem.
Yeah.
But part of the problem is we think the Democrats are going to solve the problem. And somehow the Democrats are our villains. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's in this case the Republicans, the MAGA people, the people who aren't conservative but say they're conservatives. That's who the problem is, and we cannot expect the New York Times to be anything other than the New York Times, and we can't expect Sarah McBride to go to Congress and solve our problem.
Oh, no, not at all.
It isn't. Well, yeah.
I want her colleagues. I want her colleagues to step up. And by the way, nothing you said was wrong. By the way, and I'll be very quick. I've taken up a lot of space already. But Mara, you're absolutely right about this. We do need to invite people in. We do need to. This was not against what you said. Say what you will about the evangelical church, and I have a lot of things to say about the evangelical church. But their greatest strength is that there is a very low threshold for entry. You show up to a congregation. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to have any knowledge of theory or practice or whatever. You just show up and you're welcome into the fold. We as a progressive movement, and I think to your point, Mara, we do not do a very good job of keeping a welcome threshold for entry into the movement. We tell folks that if you don't know this certain thing or this theory, or if you're not aware of this or that or whatever, we make people afraid to err and make mistakes. And I do think we need to get better at that, certainly.
I'm keeping one eye on the clock.
You're doing my job
Is
for
there
me.
time for a couple
Let's
questions?
do audience
from
questions.
from
Yeah.
you all? There's number one. Hi, Kaylee.
I love your red lipstick, by the way. It's fabulous.
Jenny, to you, your She's Not There was really influential for me when I was first coming out. I lecture at Inova. I'm on the Inclusion Council there. I lecture about how to care for transgender patients in the hospital system. I use some of your quotes in it. I recommend it after. And then Congresswoman McBride, you're so influential to me. I don't know how I'm supported at work, and I don't know how you smile every day. I don't know how you do it. My question really, I guess, is what do I say in this lecture? How do I be positive? How do I not just explode in anger with what is happening? And how do I see any positivity for us? I guess, sorry.
Well, I'll give it a try, and then I want to hear your answer too. My sense is exploding in anger is not all bad, because we are in a hard time, and there's no denying that. So we should be angry. We should be ferociously fierce. Can you be ferociously fierce? So what you're saying is to some degree, I'm not sure that you should be quashing that. But to some degree, you're also asking, how do I give hope to my students, or how do I send the message? And it is not easy because I cannot tell you with any certainty that things are going to be better a year from now. My guess is right now they're probably not. But look, this country has been through hard times before. Individual groups of people have been through hard times before. And with any luck, hard times will come and they will go and things will get better, but it means having patience. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, we show up, we fight, we invite people in. We've heard all this wonderful suggestions. What my suggestion is, or the way it's not a suggestion because it's just for me. What I do every day is I get up and I walk tall. I show up, I do my job. I love my students, I love teaching, but I also love just walking around my neighborhood with my wife and talking to my neighbors who I know voted for Trump. And there's a real Trumpy couple that lives down the road, and every summer they loan me their pneumatic wood splitting machine, which is really fun when we all split wood together using this, well, I can't even explain it. But there we are together as neighbors as best we can. We try not to talk about politics, but the fact of you being in the world and being joyful is really subversive. They hate that. If you were, let's just say you were a member of Congress and they decided, like even before you were sworn in, to fuck with you, what you do is instead of taking the bait, you walk tall. You say, I'm here to represent the state of Maine, where, of course, the pine tree state, and I'm here for Mainers. I'm going to do my job, and it's hard to do that, but I think the fact of our existence and going about our lives with grace and joy
and dignity
is the
and
best
respect
argument, because they hate
love
that. They hate that when
and-
you're happy.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Really quickly before you say anything, too, because I want to sing your praises. Sarah has played the last 2.5 months perfectly. Absolutely perfectly.
Here, here.
Some of the criticism that I've seen of Sarah is that she's not, I don't know, taking the bait, yeah, like a goddamn fool would. No, she is presenting an example of a lawmaker who is there for her constituents first, and then herself second, which is exactly what we would expect of any public servant in Congress or anywhere else in office. She's doing exactly what needs to be done, and I just want to point that out.
Let's hear from Sarah.
well, thank you both for that. Because I will be honest, some of the hardest parts of the last 2 months, 3 months, have not just been the behavior that I've been on the receiving end of. It's been people telling me in our own community that I am weak for responding the way that I have. And, this has been it's hard. It's really hard. And every single day that I'm doing what I'm doing and keeping focused on the job and not taking the bait and not responding with the feelings that I might actually have inside is a day where I feel at the end of the day I am demonstrating a strength that I didn't know I had. And dignity in the face of hatred, walking forward with that smile on, with people surrounding you, screaming slurs at you or in your general vicinity. To me, that is strength. And that's strength we've seen throughout social movements. And one of the reasons why I can summon that strength is because while there are some folks who who believe I should be responding to the behavior that I'm on the receiving end of in a different way, there are a lot of other people in our own community in Delaware who have my back, and that has meant the world to me and made a world of difference for me. And it's hard because on the one hand, it's an impossible situation for any trans person in this moment because you face any kind of abuse and you fight back, and you are punished even further for fighting back. But you also don't want to not fight back, because as people have said to me, they fear you are normalizing that behavior. You're letting it go by. Now, I don't think anyone thinks that I am okay with being misgendered, even if I don't correct the person after being misgendered. And I don't think the problem right now, unfortunately, has been that we aren't correcting people enough in our society. So it is this impossible situation where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, and it is unfair, and that's true for every trans person in this world right now.
And I would say that those folks who disagree with you should run for office themselves if they feel that strongly
And
about it.
and my hope,
Let them face that challenge if they feel they can do it better.
well, and my hope is that by doing a good job and showing how focused I am, that perhaps it creates space for others to come behind who can maybe approach the job in a different way than I am approaching it.
Yeah.
But to actually answer your question, I'm sorry. This is a therapy session for me.
Traders is also the best show on TV, so.
Oh my God, Traders is so wonderful. Okay, we need to talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
So
Can I I'll just put it, here's on your bumper sticker, love is the wise person's revenge. Love is the best revenge in the world. That if you, well, you didn't ask about revenge, but but love is a good response. We should probably do one more.
Wait, can I just actually
one more
quickly answer that
and
question?
then-
Because I
and
think
then
you
wrap up.
touched on the point of hope. And the first thing I will say is that the challenge for those of us who believe in progress is to never be pacified by our progress, but to never lose track of how far we've actually come. And that is a really hard balance to strike. And it's an increasingly challenging balance to strike in a world where we are just bombarded with negativity. I think the first thing is to not forget how far we have individually come. We are facing a crisis of hope as a community, as a country right now. We should not forget the crisis of hope that each and every single one of us felt before we came out, when we, at some point in our lives, if not for most of our lives before we came out, thought that the world would come tumbling down around us if we shared this one fact about ourselves. Or yeah. And yet we are here. And we are in this space and we are in this moment where the existence of our community is proof in and of itself of change. In its current form, in its current reality, in its current diversity, in its current individual and, in some cases, collective success. But I know that right now it feels different than before, and it feels different than 10 or 15 years ago when it felt like if we simply worked for it, change was inevitable. If we told our stories, if we came out, if we voted, if we volunteered, if we did what we had been told we were supposed to do, it felt like we were going to bend the arc inevitably more toward justice. And it doesn't feel that way. And we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But what I take comfort in this moment is that sense of inevitability that we maybe felt 15 years ago. That is the exception in our country's history. Especially when you look to sort of the pre-1960s United States. Every generation had every reason to believe that change would not come. They could not see the light at the end of the tunnel. They were facing odds even greater than the odds we are facing either as a community or as a country right now. Maybe things are different. Maybe the dynamic of social media and media in general makes the challenges insurmountable. Maybe the issues that our democracy face right now make those challenges insurmountable. But in the 1850s, an enslaved person had no reason to believe that an Emancipation Proclamation was on the horizon. In the early days of the Great Depression, unemployed workers had never heard of a New Deal. In the 1960s, patrons of the Stonewall Inn never knew of an America where they could live openly and authentically as themselves. But every single one of those generations of Americans summoned their hope, they found the light, and they changed the world. And I have to believe that if people have done it before, then we too can make this moment what Nadine Smith in Florida, an activist at Equality Florida, called a slingshot moment, where yes, we are pulled backward, but ultimately the tension and pressure of being pulled backward propels you to destinations that you've not yet been.
Wow. Let's do one more question, and we'll respond briefly. Ha 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 ha. Just kidding.
Hi,
then
thank you
we'll wrap
guys
up.
for sharing everything you guys said today. You guys touched on it briefly towards the end there, but early in the conversation when it comes to social media, specifically Twitter, X, the recent right-wing shift that we've seen in Twitter and other social media spaces, do you think that over the past few years that's because of the new generation of leaders within the tech sphere have shifted right, and then the old, Mark Zuckerberg, the old guard, they've shifted right with them, or do you think they're just following the culture just to make a quick buck, or what combination of those different influences or other influences causes what we're seeing now in Twitter and other social media spaces, not just with trans issues and LGBTQ issues, but with Google the past, I believe, day or so removed Black History Month and all the other months from Google Calendar and all the other shifts that we're seeing. What do you think is causing this recent shift in the tech sphere?
I am going to look to my colleagues here and see if anybody has a good answer, because
I think the tech industry is going to go in whatever direction is most convenient at any given time. Mark Zuckerberg, if you look at his emails from 2015, he was very, very aggressive about Black Lives Matter and lean in, ironically. These folks, what they want to do is sell products and support their shareholders, and at the end of the day, be one of the guys. And if, the guys are President Obama and his group in the White House, they're going to try to curry favor that way. If it's Trump and his guys, they're going to try to curry favor that way. I know a lot of people in the tech world, and some of them are really, really wonderful, genuinely good people who are trying to do good work. I think most of the industry is pretty cynical, pretty opportunistic, deluded, oblivious. The number of tech experts I've met who know nothing about American politics would shock you. I'm not talking about I'm talking about basic stuff like how a bill becomes a law. They don't know. They literally do not know how a bill becomes a law. It's about proximity to power, and how can we make those in elected office leverage our companies and corresponding stock options in the most optimal way possible. That's what it comes down to. So I guarantee you, if, when the pendulum does swing back, the tech industry is going to come crawling back in the same way they came, crawling back this way. I know that's not a satisfying answer, unfortunately, but it really just comes down to proximity of power.
There's a expression in Ireland called they took the soup. So and so took the soup. Do you know that phrase? Back during the famine, of course everyone was starving, and the British would give people food, but only if they converted from Catholicism to the Church of England, to the Anglican Church, and so somebody who converted not because they believed something, but because they were hungry. That phrase is, oh yeah, they took the soup. It's not a compliment. And I think to some degree when I think of these people who appear to be kind of moving to Trump adjacent, they're taking the soup. And again, it's not because they necessarily believe there hasn't been a conversion. They're hungry. And what are they hungry for? Well, in this case, they're hungry for power. They're hungry for money. They're hungry for influence. But I feel that it's not about what's really in their hearts. I have to believe that.
I agree with you.
And that we, if we are patient, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to be saying love will prevail as they haul me off by my hair to the special prison that they're going to build for me. But you know what? I'm going to say that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it. And that is at the heart of Cleavage, which is the book we're here to celebrate tonight. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Sarah, you want to? Anything you want to say at the end?
Well, I want to thank you for not only bringing us together this evening, not only creating a dynamic where I get to be in conversation with some of my favorite people, but as I alluded to before, always lighting the way with love. As I said, the warmth of your heart and the love that you exude every single day, publicly at least, to me has been a North Star. Truly, when I think of the approach to change making and the approach to inviting people in and getting people to understand, which maybe it shouldn't be necessary, the two people who I think about the most are Mara and you. And so thank you for modeling the type of radical compassion that not only I believe we need more of to be the solution to the problem that MAGA has created for our community, but I think to also heal our country writ large and have a politics that brings out our better angels rather than appeal to our worst instincts. So thank you.
And she put it.
Thanks, everybody.
She put it in a very eloquent way. I'll put it in a very direct way. Thank you for keeping us abreast of our humanity.
Ooh. and here they are, my book. Thanks.